Hi, I'm Jennifer Jill Araya.
And I'm Sarah Beth Goer.
Welcome to the Crafting Audiobooks podcast, where we discuss the art and craft of audiobooks, and we aim to go deep quick.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Today, our guest is Lisa Cahn, independent producer and director and owner of Prose Garden Productions. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really good to be here, Sarah and Jennifer. And I'm very flattered that you asked me, and I'm excited.
We are a podcast that loves to dive deep quick. So we're going to dive right into the first question, which is, what is one book that you cast that you think is an example of stellar narration, and why?
Oh, boy. Okay, this is a wonderful question. I just completed production, or I'm actually just about to, on an absolutely important, eloquent, beautiful, heart-wrenching book called Pierce Oysters. The author is Jocelyn Takis, and the publishing company is Zibby Books. And I believe it's their June. I think it's coming out in June. And there's so many reasons. I just felt this particular experience was so extraordinarily and really, really rich for a producer and casting director. So just to keep it focused, first of all, this book belongs to a genre that I have not handled. That's fairly new. People are calling it, cli-fi or eco-fiction. So in a nutshell, the book is about a family, an oyster farming family outside of New Orleans, who has like a 90-year family business of oyster farming, and the Deepwater Horizon oil spill back in, I think, 2010, how it affected that entire ecosystem, and not just the business itself, but the society and the relationships and the, obviously the environment. So it's a really important story, and much of it is Jocelyn, clearly is a journalist, but also a novelist, and it's so rewarding to work on something that is entertaining and eloquent and heartbreaking and engages all the emotions, but is also really important and is fact-based in some ways, because there's certainly a lot of, that's based on a real event. It's just, there's something, all of the synapses of why people love to read or listen to stories, or in both fiction and nonfiction, are all addressed in this particular book. And I just really enjoyed it. So the voice for this was extremely important, and it was a pretty heady casting process because, as you guys know, it's usually like a one-shot thing. Maybe I'll get 5 or 6 voices. I don't know if you know this, but most producers will get, I don't know, maybe 6 voices, and then they'll narrow it down to 3 to give to the author and publishing house. And this was just such a unique situation. Anyway, we ended up settling on a narrator who, the process of casting this engaged all of these things that I find so wonderfully challenging about this aspect of producing audiobooks, because I needed somebody who was facile and, first of all, fiercely intelligent, very comfortable with fiction and nonfiction, because it's this sort of interesting hybrid, although it's certainly a novel. It's really an epic family story. And I needed someone who can, as I always do for certain books, I need someone who is a reader, and I mean that reader. I don't mean listener. I mean somebody who is a book person who understands how to honor the author's intent and voice without overtaking it. Like, I don't want someone to perform often. Sometimes you really do. Obviously, we all know it depends on the book. In this one, it had to be subtle, but there had to be a serious skill set in terms of so many aspects. First of all, lots of different dialects. We're talking, Cajun, which is really unique. I learned a lot about that. So there's a lot for me to learn. I didn't even know the difference between Cajun and Creole. I just haven't done many. I've never even been to New Orleans. And so that was really fun. So I needed somebody who could do that. But there's so many characters, and each one has sort of a different vocal demeanor. And there's a languorous quality to any story that's set in the Deep South. There's a very specific sort of almost magical realism. There's something about, obviously, New Orleans and in particular that is even different, even in the Deep South. It's different than other locations. And I needed someone to understand that. I didn't necessarily need a local. And I needed a man who could do women's voices without the edging toward falsetto thing, which makes us all kind of squeamish, which did not happen and really doesn't with most guys. They know how to deal with that, but it is challenging. It is. And there were so many things that I needed, and it was hard to find in one person. So I loved the challenge of it. Also, now I'm in a position where I can really, I just love being able to decide what books I feel passionate about producing. And this was such a special book written by such a special writer. And I'm an emotional person, but having been doing this for so long, having produced, I think I counted the other day, I think I'm up to 2,000 productions or verging on that. And of course, I feel emotions when I listen, but when you're putting your producer hat on, you have to sort of shelve that a lot. But I couldn't do that here. It's just like when I'm completely lost in something, when I'm doing my first read and I forget that I'm producing it and I'm just completely there as a reader, and I'm not even thinking about voices yet. I'm not even approaching it as a producer. I'm just like crying or laughing or, feeling it. It's just like, I don't know. I just had that experience with this story. And so I found the right person. I'm going to leave his name out of it because, he's experimenting with a pseudonym. He's somewhat well known, very well respected. And I think we're just going to keep it at that. But he did a beautiful job. I think he is one of those narrators. And this is going to dovetail into our next question, like the kinds of things I look for. Somebody who really understands the author's voice, groks not just their voice, their intent, their goals, the whole oeuvre, like everything, without putting themselves too much into it. It's like putting your skills into it without putting your whole self. I think that must be really hard to do. It appears to be really hard to do, although many people are wonderful at it. So there are so many dimensions. See, I'm already veering off into there's just the story. Everything just sang. The story itself, the relevance of the topic, the environment, the importance of the story, the characters were so beautifully, they contrasted. It was one of those things where it's like, it had everything. It's very cinematic, and yet it's very character driven. So it's very small in moments. There's very nuanced moments. So I needed a narrator who could understand the importance of the power of a pause at a certain comma, or when not to pause too much. Like literally, you guys know, every comma has a value. There's an amount of time you should pause. It's just because it's a comma not all commas are created equal. And this narrator really understands that. So I was delighted with the whole process. And of course, there's always the heartbreak of having to say no to people that didn't get cast. But I just feel like this one really sings. And I love the challenge of finding someone who is going to completely understand it without me having to really sort of educate them. I don't mean that in a condescending way, but I mean they just get it. They read it, they get it. And then all that's left for us is to share ideas, talk about characters, have fun, and work through particular challenges together. And that's the meat of it, as a producer. And, it's just really enjoyable if you have someone who just gets it. It's like any relationship. It's always more enjoyable to have an interaction with somebody who gets what they're doing, who just gets it. They grok it. They grok the story, they grok the vibe. And that's what happened here. And starting with a writing that is so next level is a great place to start. And then getting a narrator who has so much skills that they could be an arrogant jerk, but aren't, and they understand that they are secondary to the process. because I really do believe that. I am very old school. I believe the author. Sorry, guys. I know this is the author is first in my mind. They just are. We are doing this for them, and of course, it's extremely important who's taking on the responsibility of conveying their ideas and their story and their feelings. But I think some narrators, no one I work with, but some people do. That sounded really weird. I just meant, those people tend to get separated the wheat from the chaff a little earlier in the process, because it's not, at least the kind of books I love to produce. I should qualify this. The kind of books I love to produce, which, like, if they were films, they would be like foreign, character-driven films that could be basically shot on, $250,000 in one room type of movie. Like, I like books like that. So for me, it's all very nuanced. And so therefore it's not, I'm not looking for an actor or performer. I'm looking for somebody who can meet the challenge of it is performing. I mean, you are reading and you are narrating, which is a form of performance, but you're doing it in the most exquisitely subtle way. And I think that's what happened. I believe firmly that's what happened here. So I'm really excited about it.
That sounds like an incredible book. And what I'm hearing you say is that the narrator on this project, in a sense, was able to get his ego out of the way and allow the story itself to sing, so that he wasn't putting himself on top of it and, over.
You got it. 100%. I mean, 100%. I love when I work. I mean, first of all, this particular narrator never lets his ego, and he's one of those people who totally could, because it's got the chops. But no, it's like, it's the difference between working with somebody who likes, some people just actually aren't book people, but I don't even know if this person is a book person, but he sure seems like it. And yeah, I mean, ego is important. I think it's not, we always say it like in a negative way, because there are qualities. It's not arbitrary. I mean, you have to choose somebody that has the confidence and understanding of their own skill set, and where to apply it and when. And also, sometimes it can get prickly, not in this case, but like in general with narrators, where they have strong feelings about something. And this particular narrator does have strong feelings about his choices as a narrator. And it only makes me respect him more, because it shows an engagement and an intelligent approach to material that I want to see. So yeah, I mean, ego with a small e, I don't know. It's like, I would say confidence, and just the ability to enjoy your own emotional intelligence and apprehension, literal apprehension of the material. Those are skills that I really look for always, but in this case, I really, really needed them, and it got delivered, which worked for me, and hopefully it'll work for the listeners.
A metaphor that came to me as you were, describing this ability of this narrator, and at one point you said, like, as a narrator, you need to, like, maybe you're not putting your whole self in. The way I think of it is like, no, we're bringing our whole selves. But like, if I'm listening to a dear friend and I'm supporting them on, something deep going on in their lives, like, I am deeply present with them and my whole self is there, but it's about them. It's not about me.
You got it. That's exactly
the metaphor
right.
that came to me. Yeah.
But the key of that is they're coming to you because of your skill set. They know that you're a good listener. They know that you will help them in whatever way they need help. And they didn't go to someone else. They came to you. So that's really significant. It's like, it's such a delicate thing to discuss, because especially for new narrators, I want them to understand that I'm not saying I don't want, obviously actors are the best people to narrate audiobooks. I personally am, as a lot of you know, I'm a huge fan of the type of person who becomes an actor. There are people, I feel strongly that they are the caretakers of our emotions in our culture. We live in a culture that is just, open up your cell phone and look at the news. I mean, we live in a toxic culture. Emotion has notoriously and historically been not okay in America, in many places. And I really believe that actors are the caretakers of that. I've said this before, but I just, and as an emotional, as somebody who just feels that emotional intelligence and emotions in life are important. And I really honor and just am so grateful to you guys that this is how you make your living. I mean, this is amazing. Like in other, no, I'm serious. Like this is like
an honor.
No, but in the rest of society, or in many, many career paths, it's a bad thing to be to traffic in emotion and even in emotional intelligence. In fact, emotional intelligence can hurt you in the corporate world. And that is such a sad shame, because I actually think I think that things could be even more profitable and more interesting and more dynamic if it wasn't a quality that was considered a bad thing, or at least a nuisance at best. So I want to convey that it's important for people to understand that really subtle distinction. There is a reason you are being chosen because of who you are, what you bring to it. But once you get it, I want narrators to realize, okay, now it's about the project in front of you, the manuscript, the author's voice and ideas and demeanor, and you should have fun with it. I'm hiring you because you are trained to inhabit characters and to understand the musicality of prose and poetry. There's a reason, but you have to have such masterful control of that so that it doesn't run away with you. And this is a little bit off topic. It might be the next question, but I'd rather work with somebody who understands that and is open to that, and even struggles with it, like dealing with somebody who, okay, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that somebody who is enormously talented, but knows it and is not a good listener to me, to the director, to the author's voice, even though they've won awards, I don't care if they've won Oscars, if they're not, that's actually harder to deal with than someone who is very in touch with their emotional intelligence, is a reader, and is not, maybe they're not A-list yet, or maybe they're not, they're fairly new, but if I can sniff it out and I can tell that they are trained enough to understand, if they're just well read and they understand they understand a book, not just contextually, but emotionally and intellectually, they've got it. They've got it. And also if they happen to be, somewhat easy to work with, but also still has an opinion. Like I love it when I like it to be challenged. If someone, because I have my own moments of imposter syndrome, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, I think this, I feel this, and I'm almost sure I'm right. But like so many people, 28 years of experience somehow is still not enough for me to be absolutely certain. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, intellectually, I get it. That's just dumb. I mean, of course I know. I've done so many of these, but sometimes you don't know. You have to stay humble. Like, I don't know. Like, maybe this, I call authors a lot and say, is this, I just did that with this book. There was a last minute thing and I was like, oh my gosh, there were two characters. I wasn't sure. I made an assumption that they had an accent. And then I realized, oh my gosh, maybe they, I didn't know which generation American they were. So I was like, that's a very concrete example, but I just loved this project. And I think it was very special. So anyway, sorry, you guys go.
No, that's all such incredible and amazing insight. And I mean, you clearly have a passion for the art of audiobooks. There's no question there. And so I would love to know what about audiobooks draws you in the most. I mean, there's that passion that I can see and that we can hear in you. And what aspect of audiobooks do you find most compelling? Why have you picked this as your life's work?
Yeah. Well, okay, I'm going to be brutally honest here, and it's going to seem counterintuitive at first or wrong somehow. So, and remember, I'm a little bit old school, but so I like a challenge. And for me, audiobooks are a really unique challenge, and bear with me because, and I'm saying this intentionally, I'm a reader. I was a reader. I mean, I love books. I love touching books. I love smelling books. I love reading books. I love the process of decoding language in my own head and deciding in my own mind. But that said, there is that uses a a certain part of your mind and your heart that is not superior to, or it is what it is, but there's a really unique challenge and a different thing, a different joy that happens with audiobooks. Now, I am more of a producer of audiobooks than a listener. That doesn't mean I don't listen. It's just that I'm so busy listening to them as a producer that I sometimes don't have the time to just listen joyfully, because there's so many to produce that, unfortunately, it's like, what's in the sausage kind of thing, and so maybe you don't want to go home from the sausage factory and eat, a hot dog or whatever. But I mean, that sounds terrible. I love it. I just listen to so many wonderful people that, I don't have to consume them as a consumer. So the challenge that I really enjoy is that those same qualities that you feel as a reader are now in the care of somebody who, as I just described, has the skill set that I talked about. And what that enables a listener to do is it engages different synapses, different part of the heart and mind. It's not inferior or superior. It's just different. And yet it's similar. So in that sounds so basic, but like basically what I think I'm trying to say, and I haven't really articulated this ever before, but I think that the skills that your brain and your heart use when you're reading, you are actually working. You're decoding language. You're making decisions. You're making assumptions, which are fun when you're doing them. It's like, I think this is the voice the author must have had in mind, or maybe they didn't, and this is what I'm doing in my head. But what I love about having someone else, first of all, you get to experience a different kind of pure form of joy, the pure form of just listening. That's all you're doing. You're listening and you're learning. That's what you're doing. And someone else is doing the sort of heavy lifting of making those decisions. And if you have the right narrator making the right decisions, it is blissful as a listener. But that's why casting is so important. And I love the challenge of taking my passion for reading and my respect for the printed page and creating a whole new edition of it, a format. And it's really a unique challenge, because if you do it wrong, then the listeners are being either pandered to or are being told it's too, it's got to be subtle. I mean, obviously, we're again talking about a certain kind of book. I mean, obviously, if it's like, a Star Wars book, or like a sort of a Marvel book, or a graphic novel that's been adapted, or something that could almost be a video game, that's totally different. But my love for audiobooks comes from making them. So sometimes it's a little hard to talk about my love for audiobooks in general, but because I love digging into it. And then that sort of transitional thing that happens, it's like this dance between writer, narrator, and director / producer, casting person, whatever. And all the pistons have to be firing, and it's like its own language, and you have to all understand without even really talking about it too much. You just have to get it. And, sometimes it's like, when you meet someone and you just click with them, it's got to happen. And it happens in a triad in my estimation. So I love the art of it. It's actually artful. When I read, it's very intimate and personal. It's like me and with my, tea and my curled up by the fire and my jammies or whatever. But this is next level storytelling. It also addresses, as we've all heard and is so true, the receptors that are human, the way that humans have been enjoying oral storytelling for millennia. Like, we want to connect with each other. We want to hear other voices. We want to share. Like, if you're listening to an audiobook and somebody else is reading it to you, it can feel like you're the only two people experiencing it, but you're kind of experiencing it together, which is a very different vibe than experiencing it totally alone in your own head in a chair. I mean, I do feel like I do think about authors a lot when I'm reading or listening, because I'm very much, I love writers and I respect them and I want to be one, someday if I ever stop doing this. So they're different. It's a different art. I personally think it's more artful, and it engages parts of my passions. First of all, I love, I did some theater when I was younger, and my son is an actor, and I very much love that whole art form. And I also love reading. So what could be better than combining them? It's like, Reese's peanut butter cup. So,
For
so
sure.
I don't know. I don't know. It's really hard to articulate why but I don't like this rivalry thing. Like, oh, like when I first started doing this in the 90s, it was like, oh, that's for people who are lazy, or, they have some kind of problem, whatever. It's like, it's not at all true. That's not, it's an art form, and it's a collaborative art form, which is a wonderful thing when you are basically isolated and kind of a, remote worker, and, coming off true isolation and all of that. You experience the joy of a story with other people. So that's what makes it really special. And it's also really fun. It's like sometimes you feel like you're making a movie, but you feel like, I sometimes have this feeling like I feel bad for filmmakers because they are doing this thing and it's so expensive and it's so elaborate, and they have to go find a location, and they have to find people, and they have to care what they look like, and oh my God, did my actor gain weight, and are they not going to fit in the role anymore, and what about these contracts, and blah, 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 blah. It's like this monstrous amount of activity to bring a story to the screen. And believe me, filmmaking's amazing. I love it. It's amazing. But there's I love the simplicity of a well-cast voice and a beautifully written manuscript. And it is exceedingly entertaining and can be intellectual. It can be a learning experience. And it's so pure, and it's so simply done and affordably done. So I don't know. That's why I love audiobooks as a producer. And as a listener, I don't know. Now I'll have more time to listen. So you'll have to have me come back next year as a consumer. And
Right. Those are some pretty good reasons to be passionate about it and have love for the art form.
And I just want to say one other thing. I really love working with narrators and authors. Those are my favorite people in the world. And they just are everything I said before about actors being the caretakers of our emotions. I feel that way very strongly about writers as well. We are all HSPs, highly sensitive people. And I think that, we need more of that in the world. And I think we need people who are taking a moment in a frenetic world to make decisions about art and ideas and truth and reality and just word choices. And like, our lives are so frenetic. Everyone's got, it's just, we're all so overstimulated, and there's so much stuff happening. It's hard to. So I'm so grateful to the people who somehow have figured out how to just calm down, find a place, write something, tap into their inner artist, and bring it to the rest of us who can't figure out how to do that. It's such a gift.
Yeah, we live vicariously.
Well,
for sure.
Many of us appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we've talked about a specific example of a beautiful marriage of book and narrator, and we've talked about what's so beautiful about the craft, I find myself curious when, taking you back to the beginning of the casting process, and you're first listening to those auditions, those 6 or so auditions you've solicited.
Mm-hmm.
What makes one audition stand out over others?
Do you mean in general, or for this? Can we talk in general?
In general.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, so many qualities. Of course, it's hard to, it's so genre and book specific that those qualities are a given. I can't really, like, obviously if there's certain dialects, I need someone who can handle them or whatnot. But if you want to talk in generalities, things that stand out to me are first and foremost, emotional intelligence. And I can tell, like, someone needs to be a book person. They need to be a reader. It doesn't mean they have to be one of those, have grown up as one of those children who like literally absorbs, like puts a book under their pillow, a different book under their pillow every night, and they literally absorb it by osmosis. Because I wasn't even that kid. In fact, I kind of find it weird that I work in book publishing, because I always loved books, but I didn't absorb them the way some people did. I was very picky and very slow. So emotional intelligence, somebody who clearly enjoys words, a word nerd for sure. Somebody who understands nuance, somebody who understands pregnant pauses or the power of pausing, somebody who has confidence, but in their own skills, but is still, we're sort of talking about more qualities I like in narrators in general, but I'm going to try to keep it focused on the casting process. So for the particular project that I'm casting, I will read it first. Well, truthfully, a lot of times you have to kind of eyeball it first, and then really basic stuff comes to the forefront. Like sometimes you actually start hearing people's voices that you already know. I try not to do that too much because I really love working with all kinds of new people. I like to keep things really moving. There's so much talent out there that I want to see who else. I'm very curious about who else is out there, but sometimes you just can't help it. You're like, oh my God, this is totally this person. But that doesn't happen that often because there's so many people who can handle. I think the biggest heartbreak for me is that there's far more talent than there are manuscripts. That's just a fact. So the things that I look for are this kind of quiet intelligence and emotional understanding, emotional intelligence, a respect for the subtext, a respect for what is in between the words, whether it's a pause or a nuance or just an idea, a premise that isn't actually spelled out, but it's clearly there. Like the heartbreak of that oil spill in that book I just talked about, that heartbreak is the underlayment of that entire book. And if I hired someone who was a very suburban-y kind of climate change skeptic, I don't actually know the politics of most of the people that I work with, but I don't know if somebody had those feelings inside them, I'm not sure they would have. I don't know, but maybe they are. I don't know if that particular one, would have worked. Like I need someone to understand what's really happening in the meta level and in the sub level too. This sounds so like hyper intellectual poppycock, but you know what I'm saying. Like I just want someone to really get the whole thing. You have to. It's an elephant. Every manuscript is an elephant in terms of consuming it, in terms of producing it as a narrator. It's physically. There's a lot of physical work there. It's labor to read out loud. Anybody who has a kid who has had to read, a chapter book in the evenings to their kid, and you're like, I don't even know how you guys do this. Those narrators who have kids, because how do you spend the day in the booth and then go and read your kid a goodnight story, and they're like, one more chapter, mommy, and you're like, your jaw is just like not there and your brain isn't there. Like I always had that sensation. Like I remember when my son graduated onto like chapter books and I was like, I still wanted to read to him, but I was also like, oh my God, there's like 12 pages left and I'm so tired. So anyway, I'm off topic again, but basically.
I feel like sometimes in the booth, that's how it goes too.
Yeah, yes. Well, exactly. Exactly.
You take a break and you gear back up and you make it happen.
I know. It's a marvel to me every time because I'm just listening as a director and I'm like, oh my God, we need a break. I need a break. Like I can't even sit still for that long. I don't know how people do it. I do, but I don't. Okay, so I went off on this tangent, but so the basic stuff is now that I'm going to talk in practicalities for a second. Now that we have home booths, I'm sorry to say, I used to always tell, it's funny, I just realized for years, I was telling authors when I send them auditions, I was saying, now remember, you're only listening for the traits that you want to hear in the voice, vocal demeanor, performance, how you feel this narrator represents your ideas and your words and the musicality of your writing and da-da-da. And then I used to say don't worry about the quality, any audio quality. That's not going to be an issue because they're going to be in a commercial studio. I can't do that anymore often. So what people need to realize is I actually am also auditioning your home studio. If you're auditioning in a home studio and I think you're going to record it there, I am. I'm sorry to say I am. And that doesn't mean this has happened numerous times where I absolutely loved someone, but I didn't love their studio. And I'll just be totally honest. I'll say, listen, I want you on the short list, but do you have any more blankets? Can you put some things around you? Do you have another mic we can swap out? Do you have another studio you can go to? That's kind of a new-ish thing post-pandemic. So I listen for that. That's really pragmatic. I listen for other pragmatic things are just decoding language. Like, are you literally a good reader? You know, some people, like, you have to, you know, pronunciations and all the basic stuff. But that sweet spot of confidence and modest and I hate to use the word modest, but humble or openness to apprehending, to absorbing some author's ideas and words. I need that sweet spot. I need someone who has the skills that has the skills that are they don't necessarily have to be automatic. Like, you don't need someone who's been doing this for 30 years and has won 1 million Audies and has gone to Yale Drama. I don't need that necessarily. In fact, I probably can't afford that, but I definitely need someone who knows their work, their what they bring, that has that confidence, but is still a good listener and really and can work collaboratively. That's, I think, all I'm really saying. Like, be open to collaborative ideas. This is a team. The author, the director, producer, and the narrator are a team. And we may not even directly all communicate with each other during it, but we are a team and we all have an agenda, and our larger agenda is to make the best, most eloquent, entertaining, and saleable production that we can. So I personally, I'm a little different than other producers, maybe. I don't know. I really like to work with people that I just like. I'm going to be working really intensely with them if I'm directing them. And, you know, I was sort of trying to say this before. I would rather work with somebody who needs a little more tweaking or a little more discussion and maybe spend a couple of extra hours in an expensive studio, because they're open to making decisions about character choices and stuff with me, or they're at least, and they're willing to. And believe me, I'm open-minded. If they have very strong feelings about a character, go tell me, and I'm open to it, because chances are they're the actor. They probably know better. And I welcome. Sometimes I don't read a character the way the narrator did, and I may not even have prepped the script to the level that they did. So I'm really open to that. But I'd rather work with that person who needs a little more discussion and a little more expense in terms of studio time than somebody who's just like, nope, I'm done. I don't need you. Goodbye. You gave it to me. Good. We're done. I'll deliver to you. I mean, if that can happen, and that's great. But if they're completely closed down and really diva-esque about it or whatever, I do give people a lot of chances, but it's draining. It's just exhausting. And you know, it's just tiring. I just can't. I don't have the bandwidth for that much anymore. And it's just, the fact is, there's just too many cool people out there that are lovely and easier to work with. So, yeah. But in terms of just like practical skills, like obviously love of language, love of the nuance of language, a respect for authors and what they have to say, and respect for your own skills and chops that you've worked so hard on to get there. And that's something I also want to say to narrators. It's like, I know it's such a hard business, and being an actor is such a difficult thing. My son is really wants to do that, and he's in a BFA program right now. And I basically took this line from all of you. The two takeaways from all of my wonderful actor colleagues is, your job is auditioning, and once in a while you actually get to have fun and do something. Also prepping, I'm sorry, I have to say, I mean, I think 99.9% of narrators will absolutely prep a manuscript, but it blows me away when people think it's a bragging point that you can show up in a studio without having read it. And it's just so weird. It's like, I don't understand why anyone would ever confess that, and they do. And then they're on, I hate to say it, but it's not that I'm going to be a jerk about it, or like, I will give people chances, but I don't want to take that chance. It's not like I'm punishing them by not hiring them again or even considering them again, but I can't take the chance if somebody's not. It's too risky, because then what could happen is what's especially frustrating is if somebody doesn't really prep and you're in there and I'm directing, and then they have this opinion about some character and they're just winging it. Then it's like, you don't have. I don't mean to sound like a jerk, but it's kind of like, I think you kind of gave that right to that opinion away when you came here without even having really read the book. So that's a negative quality but positive ones. I mean, I don't know. There's my biggest heartbreak is there are so many talented people that have all of these qualities, and and there's only a finite number of books. I mean, it seems like there's infinite, and maybe there are, but are there any other like very specific skills or things that I'm not addressing in terms of casting in general? I'm trying to think. If you want to talk real practical, I don't care about things like, union memberships or whatever. Like things are, if you're open to, depending on who the client is now that I'm independent, if you're open to varying rates that are respectable and respectful and still within the framework of what's appropriate, that's helpful. Like, it's very rare, but some people will just say, I will not do it for less than this. And and sometimes they price themselves out of a job, unfortunately, because there's so many different kinds of clients now in publishing houses and different budgets. And, a lot of authors are coming straight to people like me, and that they're doing it themselves, but they still want a professional voice. That's a different price point for them. And I'm not asking, believe me, I respect it. If a narrator's like, yeah, well, I can't, I get it. And I'm not asking for anything unseemly, but I'm just saying like an open-mindedness in all corners is really helpful. Whether it's about the material itself or the entire pragmatic approach to how we're doing it, when we're doing it, where we're doing it, how much money is going back and forth and that kind of thing. But I'm just trying to think what other qualities. I mean, it's almost like I don't even have to think about it because everybody has them. I think it's almost like I notice when they're not there as opposed to when they are.
Well, I mean, that kind of leads to a follow-up like, okay, so everybody has them. So you get these 5 to 6 auditions and you're hearing those things that you need to hear. I mean,
God. This is so hard. I know that's a really good question. And I've never been asked that before. And I'm going to try to stay on topic here. But that can make me literally cry because I just don't know what to do. It's like I know what needs to be done, but it's hard to do. And my biggest heartbreak is that, and I think that I'm hopefully not going to have this problem anymore. But if you're handling too many productions, you don't even have time to go back to people and say, listen, I really appreciated your submission. I loved it. This is what I loved, and there's absolutely no reason it couldn't be this way. It's just that it went somewhere else, which I'm going to try to respond to people, but it is hard. There are so many people out there who submit. I don't know. It's so hard. Sometimes I hate to say this, but it can be a little bit. Well, this is where I'm grateful that it's generally the author's decision. What is my decision is the first cut, and sometimes it's super easy. And I don't know how honest I should be. I guess I should be really honest because I'm a really honest person.
We like honesty here.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I was just going to say is this workability factor, this collegiality or whatever you want to call it, the work plays well with others thing, that's actually pretty significant. It's even more significant now because the competition is so fierce. So if someone is good, let's say, like in my head, when I hear someone, I'm like, wow, that's A+. Or I just grade it like I'm in elementary school, like, oh, that's A minus, that's B. I mean, it's just like a momentary thing. But if somebody is an A, but they're really terse or aggressive, and this is so rare, but it does happen. I mean, they do have a very healthy ego, and that may help them in film or on stage or whatever. Like, I'm like, okay, well, I get it. You do have the chops, but we have, a 6-week production process ahead of us with lots of collaborating and choices to be made. And is this personality going to work for me? And I would say over all of these years, it's probably only not worked for me. I literally made the decision to say no to somebody who was highly skilled and appropriate for the book probably twice, maybe 3 times, because I was very hands-on. There have been lots of times where I've handed off someone to I've outsourced something and said, listen, this person's difficult, but they're worth it. That has happened as well. So I'm just saying, we're all people. This is a cool production and we're doing it together. So I'm just saying, like, just play well with others is actually important.
The thing I'm hearing you say that's sort of overarching is that for you, the audiobook casting process and production process are much more about the project than about any individuals. And so that
Oh,
you
yeah.
really want someone, when you're
Yeah.
choosing that narrator and listening to those auditions, you really want someone who's going to be willing to focus on the project and put
Yes.
aside any strong individuality that they.
I mean, yeah, it's sort of, this is what I mean by how subtle it is. It's like, yes, absolutely, that's what I mean. But I also, it's not arbitrary though, because like, it's not just like, oh, here's a whole bunch of A-list, people. When I say that, I mean like people that have clearly done this numerous times and they actually have a very secure, confident skill set. They're not all the same. I mean, you can have three people that are completely perfect for the same book, but they actually do bring different things to it as well. So I'm trying to think off the cuff, like say, like something as simple as if a book has a certain dialect and a narrator has lived in that area and really understands. I don't actually know if the narrator that read Pierce Oysters has even spent any time in that area. And I didn't ask. I certainly felt like it. And the research was done. Oh, this is huge. We have to talk about that. Somebody who's willing to do the research. I mean, for me to learn something, I love it when a narrator teaches me something. I mean, authors always teach me something because that's what they're doing. They're conveying information that I don't yet know. But narrators, it's like, oh my God, I'm ashamed to admit this, but I didn't know the difference between Creole and Cajun. I had no idea. They're completely different groups and voices, and I just don't know. I'm such a New Yorker, and so like it could come down to something like, are they familiar with this culture? Well, first of all, there's the whole question of, ethnicity and casting and all that, but that's a whole new separate podcast. But, you certainly want someone who is appropriate. And yet sometimes it's tricky. Like this book had people of all different ethnicities in it, but the protagonists were Caucasian. And that doesn't mean they had to be, but like it's just, this gets delicate, but you tend to try to cast, and maybe this is something that's changing, and I have very strong feelings about how it actually should change in some ways. I'm all over the map with this because it's sort of an evolving discussion everywhere, but there's certainly other characters, and you have to be really careful. You don't want somebody who's going to, suddenly all of a sudden they're doing an amazing, eloquent job, and then all of a sudden there's this hideously stereotyped voice somewhere down the road on page 140. This is why when I send out material, I try to send out the most challenging material in the book. Like if it's a male narrator, I send out a scene with a woman, and I actually didn't do that with this one. I should have the first time, but I did 2 sets, and I realized that, and you have to see how a man handles a woman. You have to see how a book that has some diversity in it, how they're handling those voices. It is important. And my whole thing is actors are actors. Good ones can do it all. So it actually should be completely colorblind, the whole casting process. But reality is what it is. So something like that, like the setting of the book, or but here's a big one. For certain books, I really want to work with somebody who, like this book in particular, somebody who has done nonfiction and fiction is very important for certain genres. For this genre, it had to be somebody who, there's a seriousness to it that I need them to understand. I can't just hire someone who's only done romance. If it's a book, a sprawling family epic, and it's eco-fiction and it's got really important ideas in it. I'm not saying they couldn't handle it. I'm just saying I don't know if I want their learning curve to be on my project, But if they show it in the audition, then I'll do it. I'll take my chance,
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm game.
So for our last question, all of us are going to answer it, and I really am excited to hear what you have to say about this, Lisa. So I would love to know, what is exciting to you about the craft of audiobooks right now, today?
Oh my gosh. Maybe you guys should go first. No, exciting. Okay. Oh yeah, I know exactly what to say. I think, gosh, it's so many opinions. It's scary to talk about certain things, but I'm going to do it. I think what's exciting is that the entire paradigm of the traditional paradigm is completely in upheaval. And I'm not talking about, I don't even want to go to AI and all that garbage. I'm talking about, you're a writer. You have to first get through the gatekeepers of literary agents. And then you got to get an agent who believes in you enough to shop you around to the big five, and then blah, blah, blah. And then the big five, it's like, okay, well, they own the rights. And then they go over to their audio division and blah, blah, blah. That's all great and important. And I respect and worked in those places, as you know, and that's definitely important. But what I love, I love how the playing field is changing because of lots of reasons that, between technology and, democracy or whatever. There's so many reasons. And, it's really a lot of it is technology. I love that is being upended a little bit, and that, an author can just say, hang on a second. I have 10 million social media followers. I've written this book, and I'm so happy that, big muckety mucks are publishing the print version. But you know what? I think I'm going to hang on to my audio rights and shop it around and see who I want. I think I'm going to cast this myself, and maybe I'll call up, Prose Garden Productions or somebody else and say, hey, can we collab on this? And let's shoot some ideas around. And then I'll probably get criticized for this, but like sometimes I don't understand if an author has so much of a following already. I don't know if they realize, they have to know that sometimes they can do their own thing with the audiobook. Maybe not. Maybe I wasn't an acquisitions person. So maybe there is a thing. Sometimes if a company takes on your manuscript, the deal is you also have to give us the audio rights. That's totally respectable and fine. And I get it. But I love that everything is changing and in flux. Where narrators, what their skill set is. I started out with this whole, like, narrators should be focusing on their reading. They shouldn't have to worry about being their own engineer and all of that. And I still kind of feel that way, but I also really dig it if, like, they can do it. And, that's brilliant. That's perfect. And sometimes a narrator who doesn't even need a director, that can be really handy. That happens a lot. And then what I sometimes do is I listen to the quote dailies. Like they'll do it, and then I'll listen later, and then I'll give feedback and that kind of thing. But there's so many permutations now. It's not just one avenue. There's no one path anymore for any operator, for any person involved. There's no one path for an author. There's no one path for even an agent. There's not even one path for a big publishing house. They could say, okay, well, we're going to do this one the traditional way, but we're going to do originals, or we're going to kick this back to an independent house and let's see what they do with it. There's every single choice has 5 other options now, and that creates a synergy or like a dynamic kind of thing that's really cool. That is exciting. And it's a little tiny bit scary, but I think it's exciting.
Yeah, choices can be scary and overwhelming at times, but I also just love the increased access that those choices provide, that authors can find their audiences in whatever means necessary.
And I also love that I love how involved authors are now. Sometimes, it can be challenging, but I would say 99.9% of the time, it's like, I love that they get it. They listen to audiobooks. They know what they want. They know what they're looking for, and it becomes this collaborative thing. I actually really enjoy that. I'm sure there are producers who are like, oh boy, but no, I really like that. I love that everyone knows now that this is a force, and that it's a respectable, and deeply competent and robust part of the publishing world. Audiobooks are paying, they're it. That's what's happening. We have 2 or 3 generations now of human beings who have literally grown up with headphones on or AirPods or whatever. So this consuming of information through the ear and entertainment through the ear is just, look at podcasting. It's insane. So I love how dynamic, I love how it's all mixing up, and it's a little heady. It feels a lot like when you walk into, Duane Reade and you're in the shampoo aisle and you have a lot of hair. You're like, what the actual F am I going to do now? Because like they have it broken down into like every category. It's like, if you're, oily but split ends, or if you're dry but, you're thinning, or if you're too thick and it's like, oh my God, it's like insane. So I love the choices, but it keeps it stimulating, and it's exciting.
Yeah.
But it sometimes does mean more work and more discussions.
Sure.
So that's what I love about what's happening in audiobooks.
That's great.
I love that we asked this final question and we are still getting new answers. Like people don't say the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Also, I just have to say that the technology of just making it so easy to download and anywhere you are and whatever, I just love that. I mean, I love that. That's so cool.
Yeah, that's very true. The listener access to audiobooks is just so seamless. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got my Libro FM app and I've got my Libby app and I've got my Hoopla app and, I can easily listen to whatever I want to listen to.
Yep. Love it. Very, very approachable. What do you guys think?
Sarah, what's exciting to you about the craft of audiobooks today?
Today, I'm going to invoke my dear acting teacher that I studied with very seriously. He would often tell us, don't be good. And I remind myself of it to this day. And what he meant by that is not don't care about your craft or don't continually strive to grow or don't strive for, to become excellent someday. That's not what he meant. What he meant is let go of trying to be good while you're doing the work. Because then your ego is in the way. So let go of trying to be good so that you can show up to the work exactly as you are right then, right now.
That is brilliant advice.
And
he's a brilliant ass teacher. I'm sorry, I just have to rave because so Sanford Meisner, who's considered one of the greatest American acting teachers, Sanford Meisner handpicked the teacher that I studied with to teach his technique. Like he studied with Sanford Meisner for 2 years, and then Sandy said, "Jim, I want you to stay and learn how to teach my technique." So it was a very, he's a very skilled teacher, and I'm very excited that I got to. It was a very meaningful experience.
That's perfect. That's beautiful advice for anyone, not just an actor.
Oh yeah, so true.
And it also just meshes so beautifully with everything that we were talking about with Lisa today. That's great.
Yeah.
That's really cool because I actually have that sensation sometimes. It's like when you're prepping before you go to the studio, you're so much. I'm like, okay, so I have to be aware of this. And because I'm trying to please, I need to please the publisher as well as the author, as well as the story itself. And I still want to take good care of my actor. So it's like, I have all of these. And so basically what that means is I need to be the best possible producer director I can be. But at some point you just got to shut down those voices and be just be in it, be in the story with the person you chose. And that is something that I hadn't really thought about until you just said it, but that's very important to do.
Absolutely.
Jennifer, what about you? What's exciting you today?
So I had this whole thing, sort of notes made, typed out what I was going to talk about. And when Sarah and I were talking before Lisa popped on our call, I decided I was going to change my mind. So that I wrote up and typed up will be used for a future episode, and I'll talk about it then. But after our conversation, I'm going to start a new audiobook, and that audiobook will remain nameless, and I'm not giving any details about it for reasons that will become apparent, which are that this is not my favorite book that I'm narrating. It's a book that is good, and there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just not sort of my jam. Mm-hmm. But this book has a huge following and fans that are clamoring for this book to be available in audio. And Sarah just really was talking to me about this beforehand, and I actually am really excited about this because even if this book is not my jam, there's a reason that the author wrote it. And there's a reason that the author's readers want to hear it in audio. And there's a reason that the author's listeners are going to love this book. And I'm kind of using this as a little bit of a personal mindset challenge, but also a way to access excitement for the project. And, there's a phrase in romance, don't yuck someone else's yum. And that I think that applies to this. This book isn't romance, but I think that absolutely applies in this case too. There are listener fans who are going to adore this audiobook when it comes out. And so my responsibility as a narrator, even if it's not my favorite project of the year, my responsibility as a narrator is to honor how much they are going to love it. So today I'm getting excited about the listeners who are going to listen to this audiobook after I'm finished recording it.
That's so cool. That's so cool. That's cool because it's a challenge for you, because
Yeah, it is.
you're thinking about everyone else's jam instead,
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I mean, as a working narrator, there are going to be projects that we love. And those are kinds of the ones that we live for. And, as you were saying earlier, Lisa, there's that like moment of synergy where, you just grok the book and you feel it in your bones. And those are beautiful, magical moments. But that is not every book. And
I know. And I'm glad you said this, because I really should have said.
Yeah. I'm just really sinking into what can I find that I do love and that I do grok, even if it's not the book itself.
That's really cool, Jennifer. You actually just made me realize that's very important for me to remember, that I have the privilege of being, because I'm the one narrowing down the choices, I get to wait for that like magical, sweet spot thing. But I have to remember that I'm dealing with, people who have been training this skill set for years to do exactly what you're saying. And I am aware of that. I just didn't discuss it today, but I wasn't really thinking about it. But yeah, there are people that like, in other words, it's an above and beyond blessing if somebody instantly understands something or happens to have grown up in an area, has this extra thing above the bar that I was even looking for. But that doesn't mean that if somebody who has all the skills, I mean, you're actors. So if you have the skills and it's a flawless conveyance of this material, then that's great. I'm so spoiled because there's like so many wonderful people that I can often find that sweet spot. But that doesn't mean there's not a lot of casting going on that just is about the hard work of being trained to do something well, even if you don't like it. I mean, or even if it's just not your favorite thing. I mean, that does happen as a director too. I mean, I'm directing a book right now with somebody that if I said their name, you would be like, okay, we're done. Because like politically, I would never I'm like, oh my gosh. But you know what? It's a person. He has views. I don't necessarily agree with them, but free speech and all that. And it's an experience to work with somebody whose views are, different than mine. So I get it. I'm so glad you said that. We're so lucky that we work in this cool, changing, just amazing place, because it's got all these different qualities that I think very few other industries can. I don't know.
Yeah. Working in the audiobook world is pretty awesome.
It is. And I'm so happy that somehow I'm still here. I don't know how.
Well, Lisa, we are so glad that you're here too, and that you took this time with us to be here on the podcast today. Just thank you so much for sharing your insights and your experience and your expertise. It was a joy talking with you today. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much for listening to Crafting Audiobooks. We've been your hosts, Jennifer Jill Araya
and Sarah Beth Goer.
Wishing you happy audiobook listening and/or crafting.
Bye for now.